Hey everyone, and welcome to Cornerstone Fellowship Online. I'm so glad you're here today. Wherever you're joining us from, maybe you're watching with family at the kitchen table, or you're tuning in from your living room, or I don't know, even catching this on your phone while waiting in the carpool line. Just be safe. We're glad that you carved out this time with us. We see you. Did you know that August is National Wellness Month? It's all about prioritizing your well-being and creating healthy rhythms with your life or in your life, physically, mentally, spiritually. And that lines up beautifully with our values here at Cornerstone, because we believe following Jesus means learning to live whole lives together, in community, on mission, and with love at the center. And so it connects perfectly also to today's message, because Clint Rutledge is going to help us see what it looks like to follow Jesus in the middle of the noise and the stress and information overload that can leave us feeling overwhelmed. Before we get there, I want to say thank you. Your generosity, your faithful giving every week powers the mission of Cornerstone Fellowship, and every act of giving helps us restore lives, serve our community, create spaces like this one where people can encounter God's love. And if you'd like to join us in that mission, you can give easily by following the link in the chat or heading to our website. Now, let's get ready for today's message. Again, Clint Rutledge is here. He's bringing us part 2 of our series, Overwhelmed. And today we're going to discover how God meets us not in the noise, but in the gentle whisper, and how practices like solitude, like silence, can actually restore us and bring us peace, bring peace to our overwhelmed lives. Welcome to Cornerstone Fellowship.
About a year ago, I finally did something that I'd been putting off for almost 5 years. I started seeing a therapist. I still remember our very first session. After I had unloaded my whole list of reasons why I was there, every stress, every worry, every frustration, all the emotions, all that stuff, my counselor, he did something that I didn't expect. He reached over and he picked up a cup from his desk, kind of like this one. And he said, "Clint, this cup, it works really well when it's filled up to about here. About 3/4 of the way full. When it's like this, it works well. You can carry it, you can drink from it, it works fine, as it's intended." But then he said, "What happens to this cup when it's like this? Filled all the way to the brim. When it's like this, you have to move carefully. You have to move slowly, because you're constantly worried about something spilling. And if one more drop gets added to this cup, it overflows." Then he looked directly at me and he said, "Clint, this cup is a lot like your life right now. Your life, it's filled right to the brim. So every little thing that you take in and every little thing that you take on is like a drop that's making you spill over. This is why you feel the way that you do. This is why you came to see me, because you're overwhelmed." That was his first observation of my situation. And his advice was simple: stop pouring things in and start finding ways to pour stuff out. And for the next several therapy sessions, that's exactly what we talked about. How to pour out so I could stop living right at the edge of overflow. Today we're in part 2 of our series called Overwhelmed. And one of the reasons we're doing this series is because my story, I don't think, is all that unique. No, my guess is that many of you feel the exact same way. Your cup is too full. So we want to talk about that. Each week throughout this series, we're going to talk about specific issues that cause us to feel overwhelmed. Last time we talked about financial pressure and economic uncertainty. And today our topic is information overload and media fatigue. I love this picture because it illustrates how so many of us feel right now. We're constantly bombarded with noise and news and opinions, and it's coming at us from every angle. through media outlets, breaking news notifications, group texts, family updates, clickbait headlines, social media feeds, opinions, predictions. All of them are like these little voices that are simultaneously screaming at us, look at me, pay attention to me, respond to me, agree with me, be outraged with me. In other words, we're overloaded with information and misinformation, and it's causing us to feel so overwhelmed. In fact, let me ask you right now, how many of you guys checked your news feeds or scrolled social media or read text messages this morning within 15 minutes of waking up? Now, I can't see you through the screen, but my guess is there's probably a lot of hands raised or heads nodding, because this has become our lifestyle, our normal, our routine. Constant information is the wallpaper of our culture. It surrounds us, it consumes us, it just distracts us, and it pulls us in. And ultimately, it overwhelms us. Writer and futurist Buckminster Fuller, talk about a cool name, once studied how fast human knowledge grows. He learned that in 1900, all human knowledge doubled about once every 100 years. So that means that our great-grandparents, they could learn most of what was known, and it wouldn't change all that much in their lifetime. By 1945, however, knowledge began to double once every 25 years. Then by 1982, he found that it shortened to every 12 months. And now today, in some fields like medicine, he's finding that knowledge doubles every 73 days. That's about 5 times per year. Just think about that. By the time you finish reading a medical textbook, half of what you learned could already be outdated. It's no wonder we feel so overwhelmed. It's like we're filling our cups with a fire hose of information. So what do? How do we live in this modern information overload without getting overwhelmed? Well, I think some ancient truths that haven't changed over time might help us. So if you have a Bible, we're going to be in 1 Kings chapter 18 and chapter 19 today, and we're going to be looking at part of the life of Elijah. Our story today takes us to the top of Mount Carmel in modern-day Israel, where the prophet Elijah is facing his own overwhelming circumstances. Like we mentioned last time, there's been a drought in Israel for a few years now. So there's no water, there's no rain, everything's dried out. And because of this, the people, they're beginning to cry out to God to bring rain on their land, to restore their crops, to bring rain so that they can have food. But the problem is they're confused on which God to cry out to. Because during that time, the God of Israel, Yahweh, he had some competition. There was another god named Baal and a goddess named Asherah. And they seem to be gaining popularity with the people. So Elijah says, wait a minute, time out. This isn't right. Those gods, they're not even real. If we want God to bring rain, then we have to ask the one true God. So he confronts the prophets of Baal and Asherah, 850 of them to be exact, and he challenges them to a showdown on Mount Carmel. And the challenge is simple. Place a bull on an altar, and whoever can call down fire to that altar, that God is the one true God. And this is where we pick up the story. 1 Kings chapter 18, we're going to start in verse 25. It says this, Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire. So they took the bull given them, and they prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. Baal, answer us, they shouted. But there was no response. No one answered. And they danced around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. Shout louder, he said. Surely he is a god. Perhaps he's deep in thought or busy or traveling. Maybe he's sleeping and must be awakened. So they shouted louder, and they began slashing themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, come here to me. And they came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, "Your name shall be Israel." With the stones, he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bowl into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, "Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood." "Do it again," he said, and they did it again. "Do it a 3rd time," he ordered, and they did it the 3rd time. Then the water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. Okay, pause for a second. Remember, not only would soaking this wood make it harder, if not impossible, to catch on fire, they're also in the middle of a drought. So using all of this water, it was not a popular choice. But Elijah, he's doing this because he wants to make a point about the power of the one true God. Verse 36. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and he prayed, "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so that these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." Then the fire of the Lord fell, and it burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate, and they cried, "The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God." Okay, so a lot going on in this story. But the point I want to emphasize today is the fact that the one true God showed up in the face of overwhelming odds. And not just because of the number of prophets he defeated or the miracle of this fire falling down and consuming the water. No, Elijah's God also shows up by ultimately sending rain on a land that had been dried out for years. And that's exactly what happens at the end of the story. Look at verse 41. It says, "And Elijah said to Ahab the king, 'Go, eat and drink, for now there is the sound of a heavy rain.'" In other words, God doesn't just do all this to show off. No, God, he does all of this on Mount Carmel to save the lives of the people of Israel by ending the drought. And Elijah is stuck in the middle as the hero that God uses. So you'd think that at this point in Elijah's life, he would be happy, he would be satisfied, right? I mean, he stood up against all of Israel's opponents, 850 to 1, and he defeated them. I mean, there's rain in the land. He brought Israel back to worshiping God. All is good, right? Well, not so fast. Because even though Elijah won this external battle, he still has to fight the internal battle. And that one is a little more complicated. Let's keep reading. Chapter 19, verse 1 says, "Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword." Okay, another bit of context real quick. Jezebel, she's the enemy in this story. She's a Phoenician queen, so a foreign queen, who marries the Israel king Ahab. And she's the one who introduced the gods Baal and Asherah to Israel, which is why she's not happy with Elijah right now, because he just defeated all of her prophets. Verse 2, "So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, 'May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them.' Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. 'I've had enough, Lord,' he said. 'Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors.'" Okay, let's stop there. Elijah, he's completely overwhelmed. So he cries out to God, "I have had enough, Lord." If that isn't the line for this series, I don't know what is. I have had enough, Lord. I'm filled to the brim and I can't take it anymore. I'm done. I'm done with the noise. I'm done with the conflicts. I'm done with the threats. I'm done with the fear. I'm done with the what ifs. I'm done. I mean, that's where Elijah finds himself. Have you ever been there? Maybe this is exactly how you feel right now. You're just like Elijah. It doesn't matter if you have these big public victories or overcome all the odds or pass all the tests or answer all the questions or even have rock solid faith in God in the face of adversity. At the end of the day, you know that when you get alone, when you get away from all the noise, those feelings are still there. Those feelings of exhaustion, those feelings of discouragement, inadequacy, isolation, shame, fear. You know that even if you silence the public noise, you won't be able to silence the noise from inside here or here. And that's where Elijah finds himself. I've had enough, Lord. So what do we do when this happens? Well, in part 4 of this series, we're going to take a more detailed look at how this story ends specifically, and we're going to talk about mental health and burnout, because that's such a big part of Elijah's journey, and it's something that so many of us are facing. But for today, as we focus more on information overload, our takeaway is actually found through the advice of the author of Hebrews. You don't have to turn there. But in Hebrews chapter 12 in the New Testament, it says this: "Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith." And that little verse, that's our takeaway today. As we face the constant wave of information that feels like too much for our minds and hearts to carry, we don't run away or pretend like the struggles of our world don't exist. That's not the answer. No, instead, we fix our eyes on Jesus, the one whose words and actions compel us to live and to think and to respond differently. When we tune into him, into Jesus, we find both the peace our souls long for and the courage to step back into the world with love. In other words, the idea is not to tune the world out. No, it's to tune Jesus in. It's kind of like when you're taking a picture of something, like on your phone or something, and you really want to make one thing in that picture as clear as possible. So again, if you're on your phone, what do? You tap that one thing that you want to focus on, and then what happens? That one thing becomes crystal clear, but everything around it becomes blurry. In photography, this is called selective focus. And that's a good illustration of what it means to fix our eyes on Jesus. We don't crop everything else out. No, we zoom in on Jesus, on his words, on his actions, on his responses. And when we do that, everything else blurs out and becomes less significant, less important. The news isn't as devastating when we're fixed on the hope that we have in Jesus. The division isn't as disheartening when we're fixed on the peace found in the life of Jesus. Now, the next question is, well, how does that work in real life? Like, how do we zoom in on Jesus when we're bombarded by all this information and by so much noise? Well, if we go back to Elijah's story, he actually gives us 2 strategies. The first thing Elijah does is solitude. He goes out into the wilderness, away from the crowd, away from the noise, and he sits under a broom bush, which if you don't know what a broom bush is, then join the club. I had to look it up as well. It's a desert shrub that can grow large enough to offer like significant shade. So basically it's a place where you can go and rest underneath, kind of feel safe, feel relaxed, let your guard down. So my question to us today is, do you have a place like that? Do you have a broom bush, so to speak? Do you have a place where you can go to let your guard down? Maybe it's somewhere in nature like Elijah, under a tree or out on a trail or maybe out on the water on a boat or something. For me, over the last year, it's been this bench about a mile from my house. I'd walk to this bench a few times a week and I would just sit there and I'd stare out into this cherry orchard. And I love it because I feel safe there. I feel like I can relax there. I feel like I can be myself there. I feel like I can let my guard down. Or maybe it's not in nature. Maybe it's a closet where you go inside and just close the door. Or maybe it's a back office where no one can find you. Or maybe it's inside your car or the driving range. Or if you're a parent with young kids, maybe it's the bathroom. Where's your broom bush? Where's that place you go to be alone, away from the noise? That's the first step in fixing our eyes on Jesus, solitude. But the problem with solitude is, even though it sounds great, we oftentimes resist it. We don't make time for it, or we put it off. Like, yeah, I know I need to do that, but then we don't. And we say it's because we're too busy, but I think it actually goes a little bit deeper than that. I think many of us resist solitude because we know that when we get alone, that's when we have to face everything that's going on inside of us. And we don't like that. So we stay busy, we stay distracted, we stay overwhelmed. And we're okay with that because at least we don't have to face what's going on inside of us. But we need to remember that, yes, God meets Elijah powerfully on Mount Carmel, but he meets him personally in solitude. And that's where the healing happens. Because that's when God helps Elijah realize that he's not alone. It's interesting. He has to go and be alone in order to realize that he's not alone. Literally, in verse 18, if we go back and read it, God tells Elijah that there's 7,000 others in Israel that are just like him, that are facing pressure and persecution, but they're staying strong. They're not bending a knee. And the reason he tells Elijah this was because that's what was causing Elijah so much stress. He felt alone. That's what was in here. That's what was inside of Elijah. See, it wasn't the commotion. It wasn't the drama. It wasn't the fatigue. It wasn't the death threats from Jezebel. No, he was overwhelmed because he felt like he was in the fight all by himself. And that's the benefit of solitude. It helps us understand what's inside of us. It helps us to get to the root of what's causing all of this overwhelm. And here's something important to remember about solitude. It's not meant to pull us away from people forever. No, we practice solitude so that when we return, we can show up healthier in our relationships and in our community. Solitude is where we pour out some of our overfilled cups. Because solitude is where God meets us and even speaks to us personally. Now, the next question that you might be asking is, well, how do we hear God's voice? How do we know when he's going to speak to us? And that's step 2. After solitude comes silence. Look at chapter 19, verse 11. It says, "The Lord said, 'Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by.' Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, 'What are you doing here, Elijah?' And then he begins to have this conversation with God. Now, this is so critical because Elijah, he doesn't hear God's voice in the noise. He doesn't hear God in the wind or the earthquake or even the fire, which for Elijah, that's what he was used to. He was literally nicknamed the prophet of fire. But that's not how he hears God's voice. No, God speaks to Elijah, it says, in a gentle whisper. Now just think about that. Think about a whisper. What do you have to do to hear a whisper? Well, first you have to get quiet, right? You have to get away from the noise. And see, that's what makes this difficult because just like Elijah, like we've been saying, we've gotten used to noise. I mean, it's ingrained in us. We're addicted to noise. Some of us, we can't even sleep without noise. Whether it's the TV on in the background or music in the background or a sound machine. And we constantly need noise just to function, just to sleep. So the first thing we need to do in order to hear God's whisper is actually just to turn off the noise, at least for a little bit. So that's my next question for us. What noise do you need to turn off? Maybe it's social media. I have a friend who did this about a year ago. They just stopped looking at their social media, all forms of it. Their goal to start was to just do this for a few weeks. But once they did that, they realized how peaceful their life was without it, so they just kept it turned off. And I'm not saying everyone has to do that, but what I am saying is that for some people, like my friend, social media was too noisy. There's too many triggers, there's too many posts or pictures that make us feel insecure, or inadequate, or angry. So maybe we just need to turn it off, or radically limit how often we use it. Again, what noise do you need to turn off? I think for some of us, it's the news. We need to turn off the news for a little bit, or limit ourselves to how much we take it in, because it's just making us angry, or sad, or hateful, or afraid. Or maybe it's your phone. Maybe you just need to turn off your phone for like an hour a day. I know, crazy. Did you know that your phone has an off button? Or maybe you need to turn off emails at night, or turn off notifications from your apps, or turn off the TV at dinner, or the music that constantly plays in our earbuds, or the video games. Did you hear that, kids? Maybe just turn off the video games for like an hour or two a day. Or maybe you need to turn off Netflix or TikTok or sports. Okay, no, that's going too far. But what do you need to do? What do you need to turn off in your life for a little bit? An hour a day, or maybe a whole day, or maybe a whole week, or maybe even a whole month or longer. What do you need to turn off so that you can begin to hear God's gentle whisper? Let me say that again. What do you need to turn off so that you can hear God's whisper? Now, that's part one of silence. Part two is even harder, because I don't know about you, but if you're anything like me, then as soon as I turn off that external noise, the only thing that happens is my internal thoughts get louder. I start thinking about all my to-do lists, or what I'm going to eat for dinner, or my most recent regrets, or where I'm going to go on vacation, or if the 49ers are going to be able to field a team with all these injuries. I get stressed. I get more nervous. In other words, a lot of times the inner voice, it rings louder than the outer voice. So the inner noise, it's harder to silence. But we have to learn to do it, because that's where Elijah hears God, in the gentle whisper. That word gentle whisper, in a more literal translation, it means the sound of sheer silence. Think about that. The sound of sheer silence. Talk about an oxymoron, right? Silence doesn't make sound. Or does it? Maybe that's exactly the sound our soul needs. The sound of silence. Because there's something about the sound of silence that resets our nervous system, that calms down our anxieties, that recenters and reprioritizes our thoughts. And in my experience, that's oftentimes what the voice of God sounds like to me. Complete silence. But the question is, well, how do we do that? How do we silence the inner noise, or the inner thoughts, or the inner dialogues that we have? Well, I don't have an exact formula for you, I'm sorry. Everyone is different. But what I do know is that this takes practice. We can't just go into a closet and silence our thoughts. No, we need to start slow and start small. And we need to have a lot of grace for ourselves in this process. If you try this today or tomorrow and you fail, don't give up. Keep trying, keep going. Have grace for yourself. This is a learned skill. So will you do it? Will you give it a try? Today, maybe tomorrow, will you go somewhere where you can be alone and try to get as quiet as you can? Try to empty your thoughts and just be still and be silent. One of the things that helps me do this is to begin by whispering what's called breath prayers, where I inhale something positive and I exhale the negative opposite. For example, I'll breathe in faith, and I'll breathe out fear. Or I'll breathe in peace and breathe out anxiety. Or breathe in forgiveness and breathe out bitterness. And I've learned that when I stop and I take the time to do this and I start this way, my inner thoughts, they tend to get a lot quieter. And that's when I think I begin to hear God the clearest. So will you try it? Will you try to turn that dial down through solitude and silence so we can drown out the noise? Will you try to fix your eyes on Jesus this week? You know, solitude and silence, they're spiritual practices that have been around for centuries. And that's because they work. We weren't created to take in so much constant noise. No, we were created to have limits. And that's what solitude and silence remind us of, our limits. Our capacities that we can only take in so much information, so much media, so much noise. And there's a way to turn that off. There's a way to not be so overwhelmed by that. There's a way to begin to empty our cups. But it's not a popular way. And it's not always an easy way. But I promise you, it's a healthy way. Because it's the way that helps us fix our eyes on Jesus. Let's pray. Dear God, you oftentimes meet us most intimately in solitude and silence. So I pray for every ear that hears my voice, that we would begin to reprioritize our schedules, our lives, so that we would prioritize silence and solitude, and that you would give us the grace to continue to try this even when we fail. Not so that we could check off a box of spiritual practices, but so that we could draw closer to you and begin to empty our cups that make us feel so overwhelmed. I pray for your power, your strength, and your provision and protection. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, Pastor Clint's message is part 2 of the series, Overwhelmed, and it calls us to trust God, to kind of reset our nervous system, to calm down our anxieties, to recenter our thoughts so it doesn't spill over, Clint. I like that. That was a really good illustration.
Left the cup full.
I'm glad you're back. How are you?
It's good to be back. Good. I've just been chilling in Brentwood.
Chilling in Brentwood.
Yeah.
I had some Brentwood corn yesterday, and I loved it.
It's great.
It's so
Best
good.
corn in California.
Thanks for not hogging it, because it's really, really good. If you're outside of the area, I'm so sorry. Brentwood corn is the best. Hey, we're talking about being overwhelmed, and real talk, just to get to know our pastor a little bit. What is the most ridiculous thing you've ever caught yourself worrying about?
Oh, sports related for sure.
Wait, you actually worry about if that team is?
I was watching the Niners preseason game, and my wife walked out, and my face was bright red because Jake Moody had just missed a field goal, and she's like, "What is going on?" And I said, "I don't know if are we gonna have to watch this the whole year? Is this guy gonna be our kicker? I'm so worried." And she's like, "You're literally worried about a kicker on a preseason game?" There you go.
Thank you. That is
it's supposed to be my outlet, and it turns into my biggest anxiety.
I also really like that you said, or that we talked about, how it doesn't really worrying doesn't add an hour to our day. But if you did have an extra hour during the day, what would you do? Would you Netflix it? Would you watch more sports? Would you have a burrito? Would you take a nap? What would you do with that extra hour?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm a fantasy sports guy, so I love just looking up statistics and stuff on players. But I've been into Netflix and different shows lately, so
Good. It was why are we even friends?
Yeah.
Because I don't know if there's a Venn diagram where our interests overlap, except for Jesus.
Yeah.
That's enough. That's good. Hey, you mentioned that worry is often an attempt to control what we're not really meant to control. You didn't say it quite like that, but what are some practical ways that we can recognize that when we've crossed that line, when we've crossed the line into trying to just take control of life, and how can we begin to kind of release that back to God?
I mean, really the cup illustration, that's why it was so powerful for me when my counselor or my therapist, showed it to me, because ultimately, as he was describing it, is because I said, what are the things that go into my cup? And he said kind of what you said, where it's like, these are the things that we can't control. And so that's what causes anxiety is things that we can't control. And he said, in your life right now, there's a lot of things you can't control. And so I think, just to answer your question, that feeling of like, I don't know if I can fix this. I don't know if I can control this, whether it's a relationship, whether it's something in the news. That's what's so hard about like our modern day like political climate in our country and everything, because we don't feel like we have any influence or control over what happens. And that powerless feeling fills our cups so quickly because we're just like helpless, and that causes anxiety. And so I don't know, like if I for sure answered your question, but that reiterated it.
No, I double clicked on that because like the lack of agency over things in our life is also something that God calls us to release. I think what I'm understanding from in solitude and in silence, to just say, this is not mine to carry.
Exactly. You release it, and then you ask the question, is there anything, okay, I have a passion for this, so what part of that can I work on? Can I do? God has given me a voice. God has given me influence. So how can I use that to do something to helps people, to love people? You know what I mean? So it's like, yes, I can't fix the whole thing, but I can do this. It's like the prayer of serenity. God grant me the, I forget exactly how it goes, but look it up.
You've never been an alcoholic. You don't know this thing.
It's not an AA thing.
Yeah,
it's like, God grant me the peace to have peace about the things I can't control, but then like the courage to go out and do the things I can. Something like that.
And the wisdom to know the difference.
Yes, see, you knew it.
See, I love it. No, that's really good, and it's biblical truth, even that prayer. At Cornerstone, one of our values is we ask, what does love require in every situation? How does choosing prayer, choosing gratitude over worrying reflect that kind of love even in our everyday relationships, towards God, towards ourselves, but also towards others?
Well, because we can pull people down with us. I think when we're overwhelmed, a lot of times we're just like, we look in the mirror and we go, I'm a ball of mess or whatever. I have this worry or something. But the reality is like that spills over, and who does it spill over to? Like the people that are closest to us. That's really good. And so they, especially like kids and people that look up to us, like, I mean, that's dangerous, because then they're wearing our worry, and they're learning how to cope with things that they feel are out of their control, and they're going, oh, I know how he does it. Maybe that's the way I should do it. So, but all this to say, like, have grace for yourself. Like, that's the thing that I wanted to drill in even more, is like, we have to have so much grace, because even silence and solitude, those practices are tough, and we're not going to do them every day, and we're not going to do them well, and sometimes we're going to try it and it's not going to work, and we're going to go out in silence and solitude, feel like we heard God's voice, have this tremendous peace, walk inside, and 3 seconds later we're going to lose our temper because our kid spilled coffee or something. And it's like, well, that didn't work. That doesn't mean it didn't work. That just means that like you're a human being and you have, still a lot of work to do.
That's a good one. And thank you for that. Thank you for saying that. Like we do also sometimes treat these messages as to-do lists of, now I have to go out, and if I'm going to be successful as a Christian, I'm going to have to be really good at solitude and silence.
Right.
That's not the goal here.
Yeah.
Either.
Exactly.
That's really good. Thank you.
Well said.
You talked about shifting your perspective through prayer. And I was talking to people just with Church Online this last week who said, I don't even know how to pray. Like, where do you even start with that? For someone who struggles to pray when life feels overwhelming, what would be a simple step that they could take this week?
Yeah, two thoughts. So one is keep in mind that prayer is a conversation. So that's where the silence part, a lot of us miss it because we think prayer is just talking to God. But sometimes we have to be quiet enough to hear if there's anything that he's talking back to us, right? That's one part. But also, I think the only thing I would say about prayer is be honest. Be brutally honest. Be more honest with God than you are with yourself. So if you're having a hard time, try to be as descriptive as possible about why you're having that hard time. What is making you so frustrated? Why do you think you keep making the same mistake? I mean, this is what we see even with Elijah. Like, he's like, I want to die. I'm done. Take my life. Like, it's so brutally honest. If you read the Psalms, the prayers are so brutally honest. That's how we pour out. A lot of this junk that's in our cups is we have to get it out and we have to be honest. And so prayer, and a lot of times you're just processing your emotions with God. And then once it's all there, out, and he's like, all right, sweet, you did that, man, he meets us in such beautiful ways in those moments.
I love that. I'm ready to go now. Let's pray. Hey, church, this week, when you feel overwhelmed, I want to just challenge you just to pause like this and take a breath, turn off the noise, and then remind yourself, you know what? I don't have all the answers, but I'm not alone. God is with me. And then, like Clint says, listen for God's whispers. And imagine if it would look like, church, if we all did that. Our families, our neighborhoods, our workplaces, I believe they would be marked by peace instead of panic and pressure and even fear. And I believe that kind of future is really possible, and it starts with us. It starts right now. Are you with me? Because as Clint said, you said it so well, when we tune into Jesus, we find both the peace our souls long for and the courage to step back into the world with love. So before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a question to sit with. We'll put it on the screen for a few minutes. Take a moment to share with, an answer with somebody near you, or drop it in the chat if you're online, or send it to a friend in a text, or put it at the top of your journal entry for today. The question is this: where is the noise in your life drowning out God's voice? And how could you make space for more of Him instead this week? That's it. I'm so glad you were here. Hope to see you next time.